Good afternoon. As John said, I am Heather Hodges. I am a proud resident of the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. Right? Everywhere I go, people are like, New Orleans. And I'm also proud to serve as the chair of the board of trustees, board of directors of the American Folklife Center here at the Library of Congress. Many thanks to all of our community collections grantees on behalf of all of my fellow trustees across the nation and those that are in the room with us today. Amy Skillman, Natalie Merchant, Heather Obernotu, who I think had to leave to catch a flight but has been here for 2 days, John Rice, Ricky Punsalan, and Melvin Butler. Dr. Butler's still here. Many of you mentioned that folks in your community who participated in your project were pleased to know that the people working in the Library of Congress were interested in helping you to preserve, steward, keep safe, and share your cultural heritage. I thought it was important to share that deep interest in your people and your communities extends to me and my fellow trustees of the American Folklife Center, some of whom work for and represent some of the leading cultural and archival institutions across this country. The AFC Board of Trustees includes the directors of the American Folklife Society, the Society for Ethnomusicology, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Smithsonian, and the U.S. National Park Service. It also includes professionals like myself from across the nation who are engaged in the preservation and sharing of culture and history, many of them directly engaged in grassroots archival and cultural work, just like many of our grantees. I am proud to lead this group, which convened here in the Madison Building this morning for our spring trustee meeting. Much time was spent reflecting on what you told us. I want you to know that we are listening, we heard you, and our trustees will carry your stories far beyond this room, and we are now more inspired to do even more. And we hope that you, in turn, will become ambassadors in your community for the work of the American Folklife Center. I wanted you to hear from me that what we collectively do is about keeping cultural heritage safe, but not secret. Help us spread the word. Next year, I invite you and all Americans to help the American Folklife Center celebrate 50 years. 50. 50 years of stewarding what is now the largest archive in the world, documenting the customs, expressions, military service, and work of individual peoples in their cultures. And that archive and those collections continue to grow in the best way because of the work that you all are doing. So more details to come about our 50th celebration. But right now, I want you to join me in welcoming our final group of grantees this afternoon. J.W. Newson leads multimedia productions for the Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi tribe. The Nottawassippi Huron Band received a community collections grant in 2024 for their project Indiantown, which documents and preserves the knowledge and stories of those who have firsthand lived experience of the Pine Creek Reservation. As they note, preserving this history brings the past to life in the present for the benefit of the future generations of Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. I've been practicing that all afternoon. Tribal members to remember the path walked by those who came before them, which documents the history and living culture of Indiantown, Michigan. He is joined today by Mr. Douglas Taylor, who is a Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi tribal elder, former trial historic preservation officer, and a former resident of Indiantown, Michigan. Following their presentation, we'll hear from Tamisha Red Ridge and Jordan Brunson, who are the co-founders of Kinkofa. So if y'all familiar with Sankofa, they are Kinkofa, which is on a mission to bring generations together to uncover, record, and preserve Black family stories with pride and dignity. Together, they led the 2023 Community Collections Grant Project, If 10th Street Could Talk, alongside Dr. Deborah Hopes of Remembering Black Dallas, and in collaboration with the 10th Street Historic District residents and a team of researchers and documentarians. If 10th Street Could Talk follows descendants and residents of Dallas's 10th Street Historic District and neighboring areas as they work tirelessly to preserve the historic Freedom Colony's history and fight to have a voice in shaping the future of the community. Please join me in welcoming them all, and we'll start this afternoon with JW and Douglas in their presentation on Indiantown.
Luigi Jayak. Hello, everybody. We're getting a little language lesson here. I'll stumble through it. Luigi Jayak. Hello, everybody. Nodung Gunuk. I am Eagle Clan. Potawatomi Nandao Huron. I am Potawatomi Huron. Menden, Michigan, Dospia. That's the easy one. I reside in Menden, Michigan. And I am the former Tribal Historical Preservation for the Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. Our current TIPO, Annalise Zapata, could not make it due to a leg injury. I'm an elder, a veteran, and the current chairperson for the Agitchdow, which is the Veterans Committee. Agitchdow does not mean veteran. It means someone who walks in a good way or is a good heart. And that's because when you go to war, you don't come back the same way. And when you come back, you navigate reintroducing yourself to the society, and you choose to walk in a good way because you've seen the horrors and terror of war.
Check, check, check.
Sweet.
Check, cool. All right, my name is JW Newson, UCAES. That stands for the Audio Engineering Society, which I am a proud member of. NATAS, that is the National Academy of Television Arts and Science. Before we get into the production and the project, we're going to hit 2 quick points of what the Indiantown collection is. Doug?
All right. Our first point is we're Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. We're, reaffirmed as a federally recognized tribe in 1995. And we're going to go over a little bit of where we've been, where we're going, and how we got to this point.
Amazing. This is probably the only time I really read from it, but we want to make sure we have the just a great description. So what this is an oral history of tribal members from 1940 to 2025, preserving the development that has taken place from when it was referred to as Indiantown, Michigan, through the development of the Pine Creek Indian Reservation, following the affirmation of federal recognition nearly 30 years ago. This beautiful nation will be celebrating 30 years of affirmation coming in December. However, amongst the community and tribal members, it will always be referred to as Indiantown. Before we proceed forward, we just want to give a loving memory to Gwyneth M. Nugent, who was such a beautiful soul. I've learned, as Doug taught, that you don't say died or death. You say walk on. So Gwen walked on to a new chapter in life. So we're just going to give a moment of silence, please. Thank you for that. Before we proceed, Doug, can you just share just a brief story of Gwen, who is a living resident of Indiantown, just like you, sir?
Yeah, she lived down the road from me, and I'm about 5 years younger than she is, and her brother was my age. And in the summertime, we'd be barefoot, blue jeans, and maybe a t-shirt if we was lucky. And we're down in the dump, and we're breaking bottles and stuff like that. And well, Junior, he stepped in front of me when I threw the bottle, and it smacked him in the head. And oh, okay, is that better?
Yep, yep.
I'm used to just talking out loud to a boy without. Anyway, his sister, Gwenny and Paula, they all come out there and just, read me the riot act, chased me all the way home, and I thought I'd killed my best friend, because it almost knocked him out.
And with those beautiful stories, having having the opportunity to interview Gwen was, you never know who you're going to meet or when the last words exchanged are going to be. So she told me, keep doing what you're doing. Keep bringing your family along. My wife, who is here with me today, Michelle, our kids who'll be in another picture, they throw around this word not lightly, but when they say family, pigmented people in this population of the United States of America have went through so many trials and tribulations just to wear a tie, right? Just to wear a suit, just to be able to talk to you today. So also in this great nation, they taught me something huge where it says 7 generations, meaning that what decision you make today, are you thinking about the 7 generations behind you and the 7 generations before you? And I just wanted to share that as we get in. So let's get it in. So this is me, man. Like I said, my wife, Michelle's here. We have 3 kids, right? Naomi, Jada Newson is our oldest, Evander Benjamin Newson, and our youngest, Zebedee. So I've had the privilege of serving 1.53 billion people through events, streams, albums, a whole bunch of different creative endeavors. What it was is seeing 2Ds. I'm 15 years old. I take a peace sign and I invert it, and then I invert another peace sign, and then I put them together, and it's Dimductions. And that's creative services from the studio to the stage. In 2021, I started as an employee of this great nation of NHBP. And like Boots and like so many others have said, that it takes that trust to be earned within those communities. I tried to, I went to the Grammys here. Oh, I did this. They didn't care at all. Like, I met him. Oh, look at these. I got these shoes from this person in that concert. They didn't care one bit. And getting there was the biggest reality check of my life. Because what are you serving at the end of the day, right? Are you serving just products? Are you serving things? Are you serving a manufacturer? Or is there a greater, higher purpose? So you'll see 2 dates. You'll see that 2023 AES. Once again, that's the Audio Engineering Society at LOC. That actually happened at the Packard campus. It was incredible. Colleagues from the Recording Academy, Producers and Engineering Wing was there. Guha was there and gave a riveting presentation on the Pascagottami tribe. And what it was a wax cylinder. So no format is too outdated to preserve history, right? And that piece of media is so powerful. So I reached out to Guha. I asked the question of the Recording Academy. That one question led to, after that presentation being finished, to LOC reps coming down, sitting to my left, sitting to my right. A week goes by. Michelle reaches out, talks to us about the Community Collections Grant. Had the privilege of writing that with Dan Green. And we ended up getting this tremendous honor of doing a grant. And I can't state it enough. That's why I showed my family. It took that trust to be earned. And so what did we write? How did we write it? And why did we write it? This is the actual email exchange. I was kind of blown away because out of the 7 million pieces of history within the AFC, I'll say it again, 7 million. You can even do the division if you like to, if the percentage is so low. Out of the 7 million, there was only one piece of information on the Potawatomi. One. Right? And that was a recording from 1943 from the Willards Rose collection. So I clicked those links. They did not work. It wasn't even digitized. So that led to a whole different progress of steps. And I'll show you that through pictures. And so that unique concept there, to not only talking to tribal elders and tribal members saying, we've been wanting to do this for generations, record our stories. So I'm like, let's make this production happen. So the project design, right? That 2 years of trust earned was many hours of work, grinding. I mean, we rebuilt the studio using aged inventory, but that trust had to be earned. So even though we wrote that we wanted to bring in a production company, I'm used to large groups. a production company was chosen not to be run with. So what do I offer? Creative services from the studio to the stage. So creative thinking is my thing. So I'm like, okay. You hear individuals talk about wanting to get the youth involved. So we did an intergenerational interviews. What that means is individuals from 13 to 86 got involved. Mothers being interviewed by their daughters, right? Because there's those questions. Mama always wanted to know. Now's your time. You got the lights, you got the mic, make it look like Hollywood. It broke down the barriers. You had sons interviewing their fathers. You had nieces interviewing their uncles. You had so much unique complexity, and it just kept on rolling. Yes, we wrote and developed a line of questions. However, they would ad lib or tend to ad lib to ask those questions, and it's just spawned so many unique things. The set design, making sure we designed a real set and saying how important it is to have a view and have things look correctly. 100% tribal designed. I'll kick over in just a moment. Productions assistants, bringing on 7 production assistants with no production experience at all. And we still had a creative. And I'm not going to lie to you, it was a great amount of work. This has been the most tremendous work I've done in my life with productions. And so it's not just the production piece, it was the project piece. But for me, it's thinking about my family. It's thinking about those come before me. It's thinking about that loving case that without those kind of people, my family and those dichotomies. So like Doug said, he patted me on my back and said, come on, man. I remember when I had no shoes. You got to keep, I had no shoes on my feet. You got to keep it going. And then lastly, the apprentice program, which we changed up on Guha, and I'm grateful for, but nothing is yours until you understand it. So having these young men come in through all phases of production and learn what the metadata is, right? Learning what a camera and an f-stop is, learning what the distance of a camera, learning microphones, polarity patterns. They weren't able to absorb it all, but it has spawned a hunger to want to create. And so I'm just going to pause it for a second. I'm so glad I can be Vanna Black with this mic. This was the cool trip we took to DC. You'll see right here is actually a projection of the 30th anniversary video and Devon dancing. What makes this special, and Doug will talk about it later, is in 1978, there was a Freedom of Indian Religion Act, which he actually danced on the anniversary. You'll see documents which people brought all throughout the community, old documents, all kind of documents. You'll see youth right here, where we had 4 different youths, and I'll say again, from 13 to 86, getting involved, treating it like an A-level production, no cameras, no phones, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, there was no selfies, there was grinding, and it was beautiful. And then breaking past their traditional setups, we did 2 podcast styles with the younger ones. We have our Tipo, Analine Zapata, and we have Alexandra Salinas, and then we have these 6 gentlemen here. I was like, okay, guys, ready to shoot? We're actually at the Hyatt Regency. And I'm like, you guys ready to shoot? Who's going to be my production assistant? They was like, hey man, we want to talk. So we did a 3-camera shoot, recorded it, and it was beautiful and everything worked out and we checked it. And I'll point right to the top, the set, which I'll explain when I play the clip. But this is the community which my family today has the privilege of serving and being a part of. It's very unique. Okay, go to the next one. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to play this twice. Speaking with Guha, it was hard for me not to put B-roll on the interview. So somebody talks about what's being done. Somebody talks about the story of Indiantown and not switching to something. So instead of using huge cameras, we chose to scale down and use photographic cameras. But those photographic cameras only shoot for 30 minutes, or really 29 minutes, 58 seconds. But it gives an image. So instead of switching B-roll over content, we chose to create an opener, like you're watching a movie or like you're watching a show. So this is it. I'm going to play it through once and then play it back twice. And then Doug and I are going to break down the Easter eggs, which are here. So as anytime anybody sees this collection, they can understand it, or at least try. So I'll take it back. this is our project photo. And then we pause it here. You see the document. So this is actually a tribal member by the name of Lavelle Marshall. With the youth or the younger individuals, you need to get your hands dirty. Get in there and work. No face is shown of anybody that is not an elder or an ancestor, but flipping through, turning through the pages of history. As you turn through those pages of history, right, you discover history. Right beneath it, you'll see Sam Mandoka and others. And what you'll also see is these Potawatomi baskets, not in color, right? But then as you flip through to the next page, what do you see in the present day? Potawatomi baskets, continuing those traditions. You'll see a backlit buffalo, which took a community effort. I think it took like 5 hours, and they just brushed the buffalo to make it look beautiful, backlit it to give more depth. So everything in the set is real. I'll pause it here. In between two chiefs, once again, you have Sam Madoka, and this is Chief Mugwago, correct? Or Phineas. Pam. So Sam Pam. And yeah. So in between two chiefs, right, standing as pillars. But once again, I'll hit play, make sure I do this right. Hit play. This book you see, turning the page, you'll see the Library of Congress insignia. This was the book where that one reference to that recording in Willard's Rose was found. And once again, another, not an elder, turning the pages on history while you're in between it. Thank you for your patience. Gotta hit it twice. Hit it twice and it comes better. Cool. And then from here, it just rolls. Elders, Tony Medeiros. You have all different kind of elders. Pastor Robert Williams, Doug himself. And then I'll pause it or I'll let it go by. It says our story, not his story. You know, it's a term saying instead of his story, it's his story. So telling their own stories and listening to all you colleagues, it was so unique being outside, but then brought inside and then shown love. But that was predicated on hard work, dedication, and just being truthful. I'll pass the mic, my brother.
It was you. Usually in a different setting, when the community comes together, the membership, meeting the tribal members, when we do teachings, we usually have a ceremonial fire. And so just imagine the ceremonial fire here, and you're coming in through the eastern door, and you have your tobacco, your sage, and a couple other sweetgrass, and you pick it up and you say your prayer, and then you put those items in the fire in each of the four directions in a clockwise manner. And so the ideal is those medicines are actually transferring your prayer into the fire. So when it burns, the smoke can be seen by the ancestors and the Creator. So that's one teaching. And this picture here is of when me and my son met JW, and we were at the gathering up in northern Michigan of all the Potawatomi tribes. And we're actually in our veteran uniforms after the grand entry. And my son is a retired military. And JW come up behind us. We're sitting there and we're messing around with the microphones, and he already had an idea in his head. And then when we start playing around, interviewing each other, then he approached us. And my son is a PhD candidate, and he used part of his thesis to jumpstart the original programs. What were we up? About number 3 now?
For the documentation, our third, yes. It was the Potawatomi Voices of History, named up by your son, Jesse Taylor.
Yep. And Jesse developed the original questions and the time frame, which was an hour total, 15 or 20 minutes to 30 minutes on the interview. We had mental health specialists there, not only for the person being interviewed, but also for the ones doing the questions. And I will tell you, I'm glad they were there. It's very, well, let me finish the rest of the scenario. After we do the interview, we would go over the questions, make our notations, and then kind of decompress. And then we found out that we could not do more than 2 interviews because of the intensity of the questions and the passions of the persons that were answering the questions. And I would tell you, and I'm going to give you personal experiences, that I interviewed my nephew who was in the foster care system. And me, being a young man, had really believed in the system. Well, in this case, the system failed. All 5 of his siblings went to the same home. Unfortunately, they were not, how I say, good actors. And there was physical and mental abuse. And so during that come out during the interview, and it's a crushing feeling when you have to experience that from your own nephews and nieces. So there was things like that. Again, I was glad we had the mental health people there, wonderful people. And so there's things like that during trying to capture what it was like then and now. That's real life stuff. So could we have the next slide? Okay, this is, we're trying to capture the geography or topography of the time. Back in the early 40s, society was much different. You had multiple households in a single dwelling. Most of the dwellings were nothing more than a building with no interior walls. There might have been framing. There were some houses that had dirt floors and potbelly stove. You know, kids, family, you know, they might be, if they were lucky, the old-fashioned metal beds as you see in the movies that they would sleep on. There'd be 3 or 4 of them in the bed or a mattress on the floor. There were 3, no, go ahead, next one. This is the same thing. This is a fast forward to what our reservation is like now. High energy efficient houses, natural gas, backup generators. And this is a current photo of our main campus. We actually have 2 of them. All of our services are mirrored in the northern office, and it's connected by, you know, high-speed internet. That's another one. And this is our traditional arena for our powwows. You're looking through the eastern door. And as I said before, we go in a circular clockwise motion.
Okay. And then this is living traditional in the modern world. So it took a lot to do this right here, what you see. These lights represent the 12 Potawatomi or Potawatomi nations coming together to form a newly created confederacy in 2023. There's a lot of trauma of why they were broken apart, but the Potawatomi go as far south as Mexico, as far north as Canada, and forming this confederacy was huge. During those practice moments or those practice rounds where we're developing questions, I also made sure I ran a very unique powwow. So we needed lights in the dark areas. We didn't need the 200-foot crossing lights in the air, but we did it. And I didn't know how big of an impact it would have on the individuals. Talking to individuals like Doug, knowing what the color green and the color purple means, spirit colors, it really hit the nation and other nations in a special way. So being next to Doug, not necessarily being a tribal member for the Nottawasepi, but being able to serve special skills and abilities has been life-changing. And just being here with you today, man, I'm just saying thank you.
Just as a quick comment, anything we do, for us, failure is not an option. Just like everyone here, failure is not an option, what we do. And we're very proud of what we do. We learn from our mistakes, other people's mistakes, their successes, but more their failures. It's where we really get our knowledge from and moving forward in a good way. I want to thank JW and everybody in this room for who you are, what you do, your passion for whatever it is you're here representing. It's totally incredible, remarkable. This is a great nation. This institution is the keepers of our way of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Please join me now in welcoming Misha Rudd Ridge and Jordan Brunson, who are going to share with us their project, If 10th Street Could Talk.
Oh, how y'all doing? Good, good, good. As you just heard, I'm Jordan. This is Misha. We are the project leads for If 10th Street Could Talk, as well as the founders of Kinkofa. What we do is we build technology that supports Black folks in preserving, documenting, and sharing family history. And that work is really inspired by our personal journeys. So we began around 4 years ago. We met on an app called Clubhouse, sort of like a social media app, where we built a community for Black folks to explore and connect with their roots. After doing that, we actually started having some conversation and learned that both of our families are from these very small towns in Southwest Arkansas, like Lost Prairie, Texarkana. And we started to say, I think there's something to that. And we piloted a relative matching tool for our community to discover cousins within the community. And from that, we actually learned that we are long lost cousins. So after learning that, we really were inspired to see a similar outcome for many more Black folks, being able to connect with their roots and their cousins. And so we started building Kinkofa and the technology to support it, not just to work with families, but also communities and cultural heritage organizations. But Kinkofa, as I mentioned, is the technology that bridges that all together. And so for our If 10th Street Could Talk project, we partnered with a cultural heritage organization called Remembering Black Dallas, which is focused on documenting and sharing the history of Black Dallas and the North Texas region, as well as the 10th Street Residential Association.
Hey everybody, can y'all hear me? Good. So I'll go into a little bit more about how we got started. So in 2021, after we found out we were cousins, Jordan was helping me work on my paternal family tree, and I had a lot of things I just couldn't understand. And doing that, it actually led me to the woman you see here on the right, or to my right, your left. Her name is Cora Bryant. She was a jazz trumpeter. She was the only woman to play with Dizzy Gillespie. She played with Billie Holiday, International Sweethearts of Rhythm. And I was like, what does this have to do with me? So I found out that she's my paternal great-grandmother's first cousin. And so when I went looking for more information about her, I found all of these archival records and things on YouTube, things in the Kennedy Center, just stuff spread out all over the world about her. But one thing that stuck out to me was that her address was in Oak Cliff. Her address on her birth certificate was in Dallas, Texas, which is in a community called Oak Cliff. So if you know what Oak Cliff is, Oak Cliff, that's my hood. So once I saw the address and I thought, okay, I'll pass by it on my way downtown. And when I went to look for the address, I got there and I had to circle the block quite a few times until I realized that Interstate 35 had actually taken out her childhood home. And so that's about April 2021. Fast forward, I got stood up for a day with a friend to go on a Juneteenth tour. And on that tour, because I got stood up, I had to sit with people I didn't know. And one of those people was Larry Johnson, who's a community member from 10th Street. And then we were sitting right behind the late Dr. George Keaton, who was the founder of Remembering Black Dallas. And I was telling them that, I was telling the story of Cora, and I told him what I was doing with Kenkofa, and he was just like, okay, so you're a descendant, you're young, what are you gonna do about this? And every stop we went on, he kept asking me, okay, so what are you gonna do? And so Jordan and I think we were probably about 2 months into founding Kenkofa. Someone sent us a grant opportunity. It was a community collections grant. And we were going back and forth as usual about what we were gonna do. And so Jordan wanted to find descendants of those who were interviewed during the Federal Writers Projects. And those collections are housed here in the Library of Congress.
And so, as Misha just mentioned, I had an interest in documenting more of the stories of those whose oral history are captured in the federal slave narratives housed here at the Library of Congress. That project was documented by the Federal Writers Project, which was created in 1935 as a way to create more jobs during the Great Depression. This project employed writers, artists, musicians, doing things like recording the census, pretty administrative jobs, but also going around the country and capturing the stories of people's lived experience, including those who were formerly enslaved. On the right here is folklorist, author, filmmaker Zora Neale Hurston, who also took part in this important work of documenting the stories of formerly enslaved folks. She herself is from a Black settlement called Edenville, Florida, and she documented the stories of those who were in settlements like Africtown, Alabama. And so Misha mentioned that I wanted to look into the stories of folks who were whose testimonies were in that collection. And so we started focusing on Texas as a way to blend the two ideas that Misha shared. And so what you see here are 4 photographs from that collection of over 2,300 first-person accounts, over 500 photos of folks who were formerly enslaved across the U.S. These 4 resided in Texas at the time of their interview, and we wanted to know more about what the communities that they lived in were like, what their life was like before or during enslavement and after, and what became of their story and their livelihood. We also were interested in finding out who their descendants were and if they even knew the stories of their ancestors. But we decided to focus on this gentleman here on the left, Mose Hersey, who lived in a community in Dallas that was established after emancipation. And so we were really curious to know what happened to him.
So before emancipation in the 1700s, there were a few Black settlements. And as you can see, after emancipation, they spread all across the U.S. So I'll let it loop one more time. And then what is pretty unique, and because I am from Texas and the home of Juneteenth, and I think people don't understand the history of it, one thing that came after Juneteenth, it was more than just the General Order number 3, which basically told people that they should remained enslaved on the plantations that they were at. They would just be paid. But those folks did stay for a little bit, but after that, one thing they did was start their own communities, and those communities became known as Freedmen's Towns. Some of them are actually called Freedmen's Town, like in Houston. We also call them Freedom Colonies, and these are historically significant communities that were settled by formerly enslaved people during Reconstruction and Jim Crow. In Texas, following emancipation, there are Black towns everywhere, but in Texas specifically, there are right now 557 known freedom colonies that were concentrated in East Texas. So what makes up a freedom colony? They have anchor institutions, and those are schools, cemeteries, lodges, and churches that are founded by formerly enslaved people and their descendants. And for a lot of them, they've been wiped off the map completely due to displacement, due to highways, lots of different things. And so one thing that keeps their history intact is this shared belief and knowledge of community having existed in a specific area. And it's passed on through storytelling and commemorative events like Juneteenth celebrations, family reunions, and homecoming celebrations.
Freedom colonies had a ton to offer. So think about life after emancipation. Newly free folks were seeking greater opportunity, and freedom colonies provided that. First, in the form of land and property ownership to establish the community. From there, and as a way to expand, there was opportunity for social gatherings, creation of businesses, political organizing, of course, a sense of security, as these were Black settlements of families coming together who might have been previously enslaved together, who were seeking, again, protection and freedom from Jim Crow. They were self-sufficient for that reason and really prospered, both in terms of finance and just building community.
So Dallas itself, or Dallas County, ended up with over 24 freedom colonies, and today there's only 2 that you can visibly see. The most intact freedom colony in the whole entire nation is 10th Street Historic District. And so when we were looking at the project, and the reason we decided on 10th Street is because we looked in the Library of Congress and there was nothing, very few things about Juneteenth, like the same 5 pictures that we've kind of seen over and over. And then there was absolutely nothing about 10th Street or Dallas, or Dallas's Black history in particular. So that's why we decided to do it. It was a bunch of synergy. And so one thing that was happening at the time was 10th Street Residential Association, which is made up of residents and descendants, were actually suing the city of Dallas for not protecting the historic district because they are the most intact freedmen's town in the nation, and they were designated as a local Dallas landmark in 1993. In 1994, they became a national. They were listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and there's now 2 historical markers for 2 of the sites that we'll cover in a minute. And so one thing that happened was the city was allowing for demolitions of historic homes that were under 3,000 square feet, which formerly enslaved people were not building homes that were 3,000 square feet. And so they were doing these city-led demolitions. And when they got the National Historic Register designation, there was about 245 properties, or what's called contributing structures. And by the end of the demolitions, they lost 100 structures. So the more you lose what's called the historical integrity. Panat could probably explain that more to y'all. But basically, there was nothing left. There was very little things left. And so the descendants decided to take it into their own hands and sue the city of Dallas.
So 10th Street was founded on January 12th, 1888, by 2 freedmen who migrated from Alabama, Anthony Boswell and Hillary Andrew Boswell. They purchased lot in the Betterton subdivision of Miller's 4 acres, land that once was occupied by a plantation, a pretty large plantation, on the outskirts of Oak Cliff. And what you see here is the deed that we were able to pull from archives in Dallas County, showing the purchase of those lots for $555, as well as a visual of where the lots are.
And they started out with just, I think it was 4 lots. And then the next year, because of their chain migration, so chain migration is when people move in an enclave, basically. And so they were at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama, and other families that they were either married into, maybe neighbors with, maybe formerly enslaved with, they all moved from Talladega, Alabama to Dallas. And some of those families are the Boswells, the Freedmans, the Smiths, the Thorntons, the Penns, the Smarts, the Fains, the Millers, and a lot more people. People from East Texas also joined them, but there's way too many people to name. We'd be here all day.
And just a short time later, more land was being purchased by the Boswells and other families who were coming into this area that would form 10th Street. So Noah Penn and Hillary Andrew Boswell purchased 2 lots on December 2nd, 1889. Those lots would go on to form some of the anchor institutions of that community. So it was purchased for a colored Missionary Baptist Church and a colored Methodist Episcopal Church for $100.
And so they started out worshiping on the same lot. They say that oral history says they were worshiping on what's called a brush arbor. So basically just in the grass under a tree. They did go on to build the structure. And so this photo down here is from 1911, and then these are from, I think, 1990. And so this is right before it fell into disrepair and it had to be taken down. But Elizabeth Chapel CME, which is the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, that started out as a colored Methodist Episcopal, was the namesake of Elizabeth Boswell, who's the wife of Anthony Boswell. It was known from a lot of people remember it in Dallas because it had really tall spires, and you can see it from the highway. It was one of the first buildings in Dallas to get landmark status, and it was demolished in 1996 due to vacancy and disrepair. But what's really cool about it is even though the building no longer exists, the congregation actually moved, and so they're still in Oak Cliff today. So that means they've been going for 100+ years right now.
So the other lot that we saw in that deed was for the formation of Greater El Bethel Missionary Baptist Church, which is not the original name. But as I mentioned, that church traces its roots back to the founding years of the community. And that congregation actually is also still active. And the building that you see here is the building that they still meet in today in 10th Street. So it is one of the anchoring institutions of the community that really defines it as a freedom town. We also were told by members of the congregation that the building structure was designed by architect William Sidney Pittman, who was the son-in-law of Booker T. Washington. In our research, we've set out to try to prove that as well.
I was born in Greater El Bethel.
So you're about to hear from a congregation member, Sean, at Missionary Baptist Church, just talking about what the congregation is like, some of the events, and the legacy of the church.
I was born in Greater El Bethel. A typical Sunday at Greater El Bethel was Sunday school at 9, 11 a.m. church service, 3 o'clock evening service, 6 o'clock BTU, 7 o'clock baptismal service, or it could be a program. I really enjoyed all of it. I had to be there when the doors open and when they closed. Well, it's a staple in the community. It is known for its midnight musicals as well. Back in the day, in the 70s, the musical director, his name was William Bryant. He knew a lot of the different 70s gospel groups, the Hawkins Singers, and James Cleveland, Shirley Caesar. A lot of them, they did gospel music workshops. And so what he would do was bring that music to the choir. And so the choir was named after one of the pastors, the late Dr. C.C. McNeely. And so they were very, very good. And they would have midnight musicals. And everybody would come to those musicals. So when we had homecoming service, they called it Dinner on the Ground. That was one of the main things about homecoming. On Saturdays, they would sell barbecue. And then on Sundays, when they had the homecoming service, it was chicken and dressing or turkey and dressing, ham, collard greens, cornbread, macaroni and cheese, mashed potatoes, potato salad, black-eyed peas, pinto beans, several cakes and pies, banana pudding, peach cobbler. So it was a lot. My great-grandmother was known for her homemade rolls. So they always asked her to bring in her rolls. And then another thing,
Hungry after hearing that. So as you could tell, there was really a vibrant life in 10th Street and its institutions, the churches, the businesses that would come. What you see here is kind of a land breakdown or a property record that shows how the area was subdivided into lots. Because again, more people are starting to move. This is November 18th, 1890. So after the first purchases of plots in the community, there was basically subdivision to make way for more people to come in and buy lots in the area. Also here, because Noah Penn and Anthony Boswell were some of the initial property owners, their names were given to some of the streets in the area. And so this is actually a family photo of one of Anthony Boswell's sons, George Lawson Boswell, as well as a picture with his daughters. There in 10th Street, George owned and operated a grocery store with his brother, Bert Boswell, who would become Dr. Bert Boswell around the 1900 era until he went off to Wiley College.
Certain names. Black and Clark Film Home was one of the first film homes in the Oak Cliff 10th Street district. You had churches, bail bondsmen, small grocery stores, cleaners, everything that basically a community needed, we had, because again.
So you just heard from one of the premier historians of Dallas history, sharing a bit about some of the institutions that were in the 10th Street area and surrounding communities.
So one of the businesses that I like to hear about is the Economy Flavors. It was the only Black-owned soda water company, and it was in 10th Street. As you can see, this is an ad here, and the ad just says good soda water. This is Nathaniel Watts Jr. He was a pharmacist. His dad was a doctor who delivered some of the descendants that we talked to. Can't show you all of the stories, so we'll be here for 2 hours. We'll go quickly. This is This is Show Hill. Show Hill had, if you look over here in this corner, there's a kind of a tower and it's a star. We've heard from descendants that Dina Washington and Rosetta Tharpe used to stop here and play. They used to watch picture shows. There's a barbecue pit, a record store. I think the record store somewhere in between here. It doesn't have a sign. And then there's this is the record shop here. And then there's a salon that Miss Naomi, we didn't get to interview her yet, but she's 100 and she was one of the business owners that was moved out of the community. So she actually, when 35 came in, was moved over to Show Hill. Mr. Donald mentioned Black and Clark. Black and Clark is one of the oldest Black-owned funeral homes in Dallas. They are still operating. They've had 3 locations. This was their 10th Street location. We also used to have a Negro baseball league, and they used to play near the Trinity River. The team was the Dallas Black Giants. They have a really cool history. This is N.W. Harley. Professor Harley was formerly enslaved and was from North Carolina and moved to Dallas. If you are familiar with Dallas, it's right off H Street, across the street from Townview. This is the early class in the 1930s. The building is still standing, so the school is still there. This is a legendary T-Bone Walker. If you know, Stormy, they call it Stormy Monday. But Tuesday's just the same. That's him. He's from 10th Street. This is Minnie Flanagan. She organized the NAACP. She was the president. She has all kind of funny stories that people tell us about her. And then, as wonderful as all this stuff was happening in the community in 1930s, the community was redlined. And so basically it was deemed, it's in this red area down here in the second block, the top red part. It was basically deemed uninhabitable and low income. And so that took down the property values. In the 1940s and 50s, infrastructure development came. And so here are some of the anchor institutions that we told you about around. And so the communities, this blue line that's outlined, this is where I-35 is now. And so one thing that has been super helpful for us is descendants have been preserving this history for a long time. So this is Dr. Mamie McKnight, and she was behind the designation for the Landmark District and for the National Historic Register. Dr. Keaton, who I mentioned, was a descendant of other Dallas Freedom Colonies who, the Freedom Colonies he's from were wiped away. And so that's why I started remembering Black Dallas.
Really, what you just heard is that this project stands on the shoulders of folks who came before us documenting these communities and their really vital history. We partnered with descendants through the 10th Street Residential Association and through the methods of our project, which incorporated oral history research to really collaborate with and hear the story of 10th Street directly from the people who live there and have experiences in the community. And as Misha mentioned, there were several forces working against 10th Street, and that really made our project extremely vital and urgent. Things like disinvestment, city ordinances, aging community members all affected our timeline during and before the If 10th Street Can Talk project. And so our project had the goals of supporting some of the existing community-led preservation efforts and reconnecting descendants of the community to their history to build greater advocacy, place branding and awareness, and investment in revitalization. These are our methods that we incorporated: oral history, archival research, descendant discovery through genealogical research, and reparative mapping.
The stories.
So these are the methods. We're kind of low on time, so we're going to go through some of these a little quickly. Oh, we're good. Okay, so archival research was one that we used pretty heavily and early on to inform the story of 10th Street. We had some questions at the beginning of our project about the founding story of the community. And so looking at places like city and state archives for property records and deeds, at public records were really vital to shaping the timeline of the community's history. And we digitized those records so that they could become more accessible.
And so here we're at the, we're at the Dallas Municipal Archives here. I'll let Jordan quickly go over this one.
So I mentioned one of our goals was to connect descendants to their history. And so we did a lot of genealogical research looking at census records. What you see here is a Pullman Porter record for a former community member, and the goal of reconnecting their descendants with these histories that they may not have known. And then cemetery preservation is also a big part of our work.
And so for the last, I would say like 40 years, Oak Cliff Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in Dallas, and it's historically segregated. It's in 10th Street Historic District. The African-American section, which is kind of where the vans are, you can kind of see there's like very few markers. And so we went to visit it. The founders of the community are buried there. And so we were confused about whether there's like more space to bury or if people were buried there. And so we went to the archival research, and in the archival research, we actually found, so the cemetery records say there's 115 people buried in the African-American section, but we've found an additional 105 people who are not recorded. And so the next thing that we're going to be doing is actually looking for the unmarked graves with archaeologists and some other folks so that we can connect the descendants. And what we'll do is map the points of like where we can see what's called anomalies, so like where the earth has changed under the surface.
Mapping the cemetery and coordinating with some other archaeologists who are going to help us do ground penetrating radar. When the team we're working with combines the GPR and the mapping and the drone work, they'll be able to put together something that is the best guess at where unmarked graves could be. The biggest hurdle is cleaning up the cemetery first. From when 10th Street was founded through when the highway was built, it was the city neglected. They refused to see the significance of these places. And I feel like that still carries over today.
So we can't go into the full thing, but one of the things we did was actually make our own maps. So we showed you the redlining maps, and maps are not neutral archives. They can do a lot of things like redlining. And so one thing we did was actually map the community's memories of just where stuff was on their own, even if it didn't make sense present day. And so that's some of the community members looking and going over what we put together. And then from there,
on this wonderful project. And Ken Kofa also has some.
okay. From there, I'll go back to it. We actually decided to use AI to do a digital map. So what we did for Library of Congress was submit the map that we were just showing you, which was more static. And for Black History Month, we launched a AI-driven map based on the data in our collections.
Kinney on this wonderful project. And Kinkofa also has something very cool on their website that we want to show you, and we'll use the big monitor here to kind of breeze through. This is their interactive Black History map, and they use AI technology because who doesn't nowadays, right? And the data that they've gathered, they put that together. So the map is highlighting Black historical figures all over the country. So just for an instance, Benjamin, if we can, let's type in Dallas. Obviously, we see Grand Prairie down here, so we're moving over to the east to Dallas. And so what you'll see is it's pulling up people and places that have left their mark on the city. And you see the names and the headshots popping up there. You can explore more for yourself. It's blackhistory.kinkofa. That's KINKOFA.com. Very.
So we're going to end here on what we uncovered. We found previously unidentified photos, lost video footage on TikTok, 145 business names and locations, 100+ names at the graveyards that we told you about, and historical records that support the oral history. We submitted nearly, I think, close to 500 items to the Library of Congress. We received 2 grants from Texas Humanities. Pray for them if you've seen the news. We're featured in pretty much every news station ever in Dallas. We hosted a summer field school with SMU, and we taught high school and college students how to do the work that we're doing. We got to share our work at Society of American Archivists with the Library of Congress and at Roots Tech recently. And the best thing of all is the city of Dallas terminated the 3,000 square foot rule. And as I mentioned, what's next for us is the cemetery survey. The grant that we got from Texas Humanities is to continue to develop the digital museum and to make a traveling exhibition, which we hope to take all over the world. We have some more research to do, but we hope to make a feature-length documentary about the community. And eventually we hope, depending on what the community decides, they've said they want an interpretive center, a museum, or a cultural center. So we'll be working towards making sure our collections can be housed at whatever iteration of a cultural center or museum that they have. And want to give a quick shout out to our team members who are not here. We couldn't do this without them. And then just shout outs to the descendants and residents of 10th Street and all the archives and Library of Congress who supported us with this work.
Yeah. Pardon my New Orleans, but y'all, think about where we started this afternoon. I came up and told y'all AFC had the largest ethnographic collection in the world. DW pointed out, maybe, but you have one sound recording relating to the Potawatomi people. One of those millions of records. Think about everything that y'all have seen over the last 2 days. All of this cultural heritage that is now going to be part of the collections of the American Folklife Center. All the archival silences that are going to be filled. And I mean, I had to give y'all, that is inspiring. Not only just the thoughtfulness behind the project, but when y'all say fill archival silences, that's the work and you're doing it. Over 100 unmarked graves. We're going to call those names again, right? This is fantastic. I see hands going up. So I'm going to stop with my comments again. Y'all, that was great. I'm sure, do we have a microphone for questions from the audience? Okay. All right, I saw a hand. Michelle had a question, yeah.
I was just curious to hear from the Indiantown project team about what your next steps are in the work you're doing.
One big next step is we're in the submission process, and I did update Guha that Tribal Council chose to make sure we record a original song. because the song that was recorded back in 1943 was students Wilma and Christine, who are alleged to be recorded in a boarding school. So there's pain there. So re-record something, and it's with the Zapata family. Um, Owen Zapata was just blessed to be a sixth generation living in the same area that his ancestors were. So channeling that energy to re-record, we've been blessed to do a few different recording projects, but it's really going back to the drawing board and seeing what are the next steps, because there's many needs. There's been an influx of documents. There has been an influx of individuals wanting to record their stories. There's been an influx of individuals approaching this great nation. And I'll pass the mic to Doug, especially as a former TIPO, on next steps.
Well, as JW was saying, that we're always moving forward in a good way to help preserve our heritage. And we found that some of our membership, the younger ones, they may not embrace the traditional life ways and values, which is okay. But the ultimate goal is to have people in place who can carry forward the traditional life ways and values. And at some point when we did interviews, people were in their 40s and 50s, and as a result of life, they came and give their testimony. In other words, when we did the interviews, that finding their traditional life ways and values actually changed their life. So it's gratifying to see programs like that are out there. The only way is up. And again, as I said before, our ancestors, failure was not an option. Anything you did, you put your best foot forward. And if you failed at something, you had a plan B.
In reference to Indian Town, I'm trying to get clarification with respect to semantics. Do you prefer to be called Indian or Native American? That's question number one. Question number two, is your nation interested in demanding apologies from the different religious denominations that were very brutal in the kidnapping of your children to initiate a process of cultural assimilation? So I need to know, what is your position with respect to demanding an apology for the brutality that your people suffered inflicted by religious personalities? Thank you very much.
That's a very good question. From the legal standpoint, we haven't had any guidance on that or any dialogue within the tribe. We are aware of our plight, that the genocide, murder, trying to assimilate our younger children, killing the Indian to save the man, and that has failed. And that's because of our tenacity, and we will not yield to any funny business like that. We're still here, and that's because of our tenacity and our will to move forward in a good way and to preserve our way of life, just like any other organization or entity. So what was the other portion of the question, sir?
American.
Again, there are some people within the tribe, want to be called Native American, Indian. Myself personally, Native American, it works for me. Personally, I don't care what happened in the past. I live in the here and now, and moving forward, putting the best foot forward, being a good citizen, not only for my community, but the surrounding community and the United States in general. I realized that we were suppressed, and what I'm getting at is we understand being suppressed and murdered. We know that for sure. And people will ask us, well, why did you go to fight during all the conflicts? It's because of that fact. We knew what suppression, murder it was like. And so we don't want the United States to become a victim of that scenario. Thank you.
Thank you all for your presentations. They were fantastic. A question for Tamisha and Jordan. When you're doing this African American burial ground reclamation project, are there other models that you're looking to, other communities which are doing this? I'm reminded most recently of folks that we at the American Folklife Center work with, which is the descendants of Tulsa Race Massacre. And they're trying to do the same kind of recuperation, not just of memory, but of physical space. And then early in the 90s, when the African Burial Ground Project in Manhattan was taking place with Dr. Michael Bakey, I think. Are any of those, are those relevant to the kind of work that you're doing? Do you draw inspiration or some kind of practical lessons from what they did?
Yeah, great question. So just to add context, we actually live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But we're definitely inspired, but I think that there's also kind of a concurrency in terms of some of the research and developments specific to Tulsa and some other communities where there's active research taking place to discover folks, the names of folks who are in mass graves in Tulsa, and what their lives were in telling those stories. And so we're definitely inspired, but I think we're actively doing the work alongside folks who are doing the research in other places. So before working on the If 10th Street Could Talk project, we actually have done some cemetery research in Austin, as well as a few other cities to document headstones. And basically there have been learnings along the way that we're able to take from that research. Also for this project, we have worked with FamilySearch.org, which has the largest repository of genealogical records. And through that, we're able to look at death certificates and see who all is buried at the cemetery. And the way that we've been able to discover additional names of folks is the cemetery did their own assessment of who was buried there years ago. And we're able to look at records that did not have, or folks who did not have headstones, and see the cemetery that's listed on their death certificates. So it's expansive work, and we're definitely inspired by other projects.
Jordan left out a very important point, but he never wants to say it, so I'll say it. Jordan is a genius when it comes to genetic genealogy. And so one thing that he didn't mention is he's really good at genetic genealogy. And so one thing, and I said one thing a second ago, but a lot of their projects are focused on like archaeology or genetic genealogy in a sense, but they don't engage descendants. And the magic that we do is actually engage descendants and do the descendant discovery. And so that's what really sets us apart and what we can add to all projects. And so it doesn't matter which descendant community is, we've developed a methodology that can help pretty much everybody.